We're going to be getting the book of Revelation. Next, just finished Acts. But before we go into the book, I want to go through a few things with you on why I think the book of Revelation in the Apostolic Bible is something special, something that you'll never find anyplace else that I know of. I began in 1979 when I came back to the Lord at a megachurch in Southern California. And about 4 or 5 years of going through the Bible with the pastor and the King James, I came to church one day in 1985, and I saw a bulletin board. And on the bulletin board it said, all-day seminar, 4 hours on the Hebrew, introduction to the Hebrew text, and 4 hours on an introduction to the Greek text. Well, I thought, well, that's interesting. I think I'll go to that and find out a little bit about it. So I went to this seminar led by a man called Justin Alfred, and the first half was on the Hebrew, which completely different alphabet. I figured, well, it's going to be very, very difficult to work on. Then the second half was on the Greek, and I realized that many of the letters in Greek are the same as in English. The A is an alpha. A vita looks like our B in the lowercase. So I decided, well, I'm going to study the Greek. So I ended up thinking, well, I need to get a Greek Bible. So I went to the nearest bookstore, Maranatha bookstore in Costa Mesa, went in there and I went to the Bible section, and they had a lot of Bibles, and I found Barry's Interlinear. Now, as you can see, Barry's Interlinear has the Greek words with the English underneath and the numbers on top. And that probably recognized that in the Apostolic Bible Polyglot. But after this, I became interested in Greek words. And I wanted to put together a brochure, which I did, called The Word on the Word. What does the Word say about a word? And here's one right here that I did, scroll. And I went in there and I looked up all the passages in the Greek, but then I realized, well, the Old Testament doesn't have the same word. It's not there. And so I was kind of bummed out because I couldn't do the whole thing for the whole Old and the New Testament. So I decided, well, Barry's is interesting way it's laid out. Why isn't there something like that with the Greek Old Testament, popularly called the Septuagint or LXX? So I went back to the bookstore and I looked for a Greek Old Testament, and the only one that was available was Brenton's, which you can see here. It's a side-by-side Bible. If you don't know the Greek, it's useless because the right column tells you what the English is, but you don't know which word goes with which. Having the Barry's, which was much superior compared to Brenton's, I thought, well, why isn't there an interlinear with the Greek text? So I decided, well, I'm going to begin doing that, put together a Greek Old Testament. And so I began by putting together a text. And the texts that were available at that time were just Brenton's, and there was no computer, no internet. But I ended up going to a bookstore up in Pasadena. I picked up a book by H.W. Sweet titled An Introduction to the Old Testament in Greek. And this showed me all the original manuscripts and books and everything about the Greek. And I found out that basically I don't want to go back to manuscripts because every manuscript is completely different than the other, different handwritings. It's like your aunt writes a letter to you in a nice handwriting, but another person writes and it's a horrible handwriting. This is sort of what it is when you start studying the manuscripts. So I said, well, I'm not going to do that. I'll have to go with the suite. But then I found out that time, then the internet started, but it wasn't what you see, what you get. It was just basically called bulletin boards. And this was on I'm thinking around 89 or so. I had gotten the early computer. And I ended up communicating with the National Library of the Netherlands. And in Sweet's book, the first 3 printed editions was first the Complutensian and Polyglot, which I couldn't find, and then the Aldine, and then the 16, which Brenton's text was from. So I looked around on these bulletin boards and ended up at the National Library of the Netherlands, communicated with them, and I saw somewhere that they had a Aldine Bible, and I asked them if they had another later edition or something that I could get a hold of. And they said, why do you want the later edition? We have the original. So they sent me the microfilm. I bought a microfilm reader and printer and printed this out. And I had the Aldine Bible, which I'll show you a picture right here. So now I had 2 texts. I had Brenton's 16 edition, which was the late 1500s, and the Aldine in Venice, Italy from 1518, and then the Complutensian Polyglot. Couldn't find that, but after a while I did find out that the University of Washington had a facsimile copy, so I drove up to Seattle from Newport, where I live, which isn't too far, and I was able to get the Complutensian Polyglot, copied it on their copy machine, all the New Testament, basically, New and Old Testament, the Greek part only. But then later, I was able to pick up the whole Complutensian Polyglot facsimile set of 6 volumes, and here's a picture of that. So now I had 3 texts. I had the 16 Complutensian Polyglot from 1516 and the Aldine 1518. And I started merging them together when 2 agreed against one, that I took the majority reading from those. So the Apostolic Bible is more of an eclectic text of these 3 printed editions. Sometimes I would go to the Hebrew. I have a Hebrew interlinear. When a New Testament, I went to Hodges and Forstad's majority text. And I worked on typing this out for 10 years or more. And then, after having this all typed out, I found out about PDF, put it in PDF format, and then I published the PDF. Now opened the website and had it on there free to download. First edition. It still is free for the first edition. I never have charged for that download. And before I actually put it up in a PDF format, I developed the A.B. Strong numbering system for the Apostolic Bible. Now, Strong, when he numbered the Bible, he numbered the Greek New Testament, but the Hebrew Old Testament, not the Greek Old Testament. So I began numerically coding all the words that were in the Greek Old Testament that alphabetically fit between a Greek word that was in the New Testament. So then whenever you see a word that has like 22:21.4 or something with a dot after it, it means it only appears in the Greek Old Testament, not the New Testament. So then after doing that, then I developed a lexical concordance with all these numbers of words, numbers starting with A, alpha, and then Abba, and then listing the chapter and book, chapter, and verse that these words appeared. And that was all put together then in a printed edition and the PDF. Now, the lexical concordance has been supplanted by the Apostolic Bible App.com, which shows the whole verse rather than just telling you which book, chapter, and verse the word is in. It'll actually show the whole verse, and it hyperlinks, and this is fantastic. Apostolic Bible app.com. And so you can go there and you see it. So then I had the PDF printed by Dickinson Press, and here is the first edition picture. And then I had the second edition printed by R.R. Donnelly in Crawfordsville, Indiana. They've all went under. They all went bankrupt, and no longer are these kinds of Bibles printed in the United States. The only place that I know you can get a Bible is leather with a thin Bible paper, place in Holland, and another one I think in China, which I'm not going to deal with China and the politics of going along with ordering something so expensive. Now, you can ask, well, why is the Apostolic Bible Polyglot so important for understanding the book of Revelation? Well, in studying the book of Revelation in the Greek, you'll see the numbers. And if you went to the app, and let's say you found the number for our key, the beginning, I forgot the number, but when you look at it, you'll see all the places it appears in the Greek Old Testament. You don't have that with the Hebrew. It only appears in the Apostolic Bible Polyglot with the numbering system and so forth. So now, with the two testaments having the same language, alphabet, and the numbers corresponding to them, you can do a fantastic study of the correlation between the two Greek testaments as they're numerically coded to the A.B. Strong's numbering system. Why we have so much in the Hebrew as far as English-only Bibles, only God knows. To me, it's very disconcerting because you lose so much when you can't go back and study a word. With the Apostolic Bible, you have the Greek word in Revelation, and then you go back in the Old Testament and you'll see how the same word and how it's used, and you get way, way more information on that. So this is what happened originally. And then I also put together an analytical lexicon. So now, when you see the word in the Greek number, you can go into the analytical lexicon. And there's also some apps online you can do the same thing. And it'll show you the parsing of the Greek word. If it's a noun, pronoun, adjective, and past tense, future, masculine, feminine, neuter, singular, all these different things. It's just fantastic. Well, here's a picture of one page of it, and you can sort of get an idea of what it looks like. So now we are going to be going into the video of the Apostolic Bible Book of Revelation. And there are sections in there. Here's a picture of a section, and there's 66 sections in the book of Revelation, so there might end up being 66 videos on the book of Revelation. We're going to also use our workbook of the entities of the book of Revelation, and here it is in the 3-ring binder that we have on our bookstore. And then we'll go through another video after this one explaining the entities of the book of Revelation and all the things that are included in it. Then someplace next in a video, I'm going to show a lot of the pictures of when I went to the island of Patmos myself. 15 years ago or So that will be another thing that will be in these videos, and think you'll find that all interesting. And our next video is going to be on the entities of the book of Revelation.